Crispin, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much.
I'm really looking forward to today because, as we've been discussing in the preamble, you've had the most incredible, varied career. And we're going to touch, obviously, on what you do now, which is managing director of some of London's best and most interesting restaurants. But the first question is, you've lived quite a few creative lives. MTV, Mexico City, studying a lot of things there, not just in hospitality or F&B, but in media, record labels. How did you find hospitality, or did it find you?
Hospitality found me. And more to the point, I sort of tripped into it. So we need to go back, unfortunately, about 30 years, which is a scary thing indeed.
To the 90s?
To the 90s.
Yeah.
I had a shortish career in TV presenting. And for one reason or another, I was making my way to Colombia, to Medellin, to try and write a film script. This was 1997. Medellin at that time, it would have been a valuable asset to speak better Spanish than I did. And so I figured that if I had the opportunity to, it would be a good idea to brush up on my Spanish before I got there. And Mexico City felt like an ideal place to do it. Important to differentiate between Spanish and a Latin American way of speaking. Of course, that's a kind of ignorant statement because within the continent of Latin America, there are so many different dialects of Spanish. But long story short, I thought that Mexico would be a good place to improve my Spanish before I went on to Medellin. And I got there. It was a fabulous and exciting place to be in. Received very warm welcomes, and bumped into a person who I didn't really know very well. I had been at university in Manchester. I was very involved with electronic music and put on a number of nights there. And there was always this guy who was always the guy on the podium having the most fun. His name was Sam. A mutual friend said, "Oh, Sam's in Mexico." We hung out. A weekend became a week, became a couple of months. He is steeped in hospitality. His parents have run restaurants forever and a hotel. He was working there, not having a particularly great time. I was very involved with, as I said, nightlife in the UK. It was a bit of a meeting of minds. And after a while, we had an opportunity to open a nightclub together. And we did that, and we threw our energies into that.
And is that as crazy as it's appearing in my head?
I think all of these crazy things appear so much crazier when you make them concise in one sentence. But actually, it was amazing and wild and extraordinarily fun, and also at points extraordinarily mundane and a relentless slug, and just like running any business can be.
Yes.
So highlights, lowlights, and real life running through the whole experience, but definitely very formative and a real honor to have experienced.
Yeah. And I want to come back to Mexico because that's a big part of the story of what you do now. But fast forward all these years, and the Sam you're talking about is obviously one of the Hart brothers.
Yes. You
know, renowned London restaurateurs alongside yourself. Can you just explain what it is you do now for our audience?
Well, at the moment, I am managing director of two of the restaurants within that small independent family-owned group. Mm-hmm. So we have Barafina. Barafina has a couple of offshoots, one Parian and another bar called Bar Dascal. Quo Vadis, which has been situated on Dean Street in Soho since 1926.
Yeah, it was a brothel.
It was a brothel. Karl Marx lived there. The story of it is extraordinary.
Yep.
But I sense that you're asking for a quick summary. So we can go into Quo Vadis if you like. Quo Vadis is a partnership with our chef patron, the very extraordinary Jeremy Lee, who I believe to be one of the great living cooks. And I could dedicate many hours to praising him individually. And El Pastor, which is a small group of Mexican restaurants dotted around London. And we have a couple of little bars as well called The Drop and Two Drops. So my remit is Quo Vadis, The Pastors and The Drops.
It's a fascinating position because I think restaurants is something people probably think they understand, but if they give it a moment's thought, I don't think anyone's got a clue what it's like to run, own, manage restaurants. I think people understand it's hard, but the intricacies of it and how you make a good experience as well as good food and drink must be very different to what people think, I imagine.
Again, it sort of speaks to that bit a second ago where it's very easy to make a handy bite-sized sentence about it, in which case it suddenly becomes so much more glamorous and exciting.
Yeah.
But we really do try and create exciting, transportive experiences. So if that is the image that guests and those outside of the industry have, then more power to that.
Yeah, fair enough. So how did that time in Mexico, which is some of the flavour of what you do, it's not all the restaurants, obviously, how did that inform what you do now? What did it teach you?
Well, it was pivotal. So Sam and I opened a nightclub. There is an argument that says we just needed a place where we weren't going to get thrown off the decks because we were both obsessed with electronic music. But we really were in love with music, the nascent cocktail scene that was happening in London at the time, which also just speaks to a classic cocktail method. But the likes of Dick Bradsell, who was spearheading the kind of mixologist movement here in London in the 90s, lots of his protégés were creating bars that to this day are legendary in that lexicon. So we were very interested in that. And we were introduced to this extraordinary property that was owned by a Mexican theatre impresario.
Yep.
His name was Salvador Varela. And his son had run an ill-fated lobster and champagne joint that had folded and left the family finances in a precarious situation. And Santiago gave us a shot at putting our nightclub, our idea into his space. It was a 1940s building in a not particularly glamorous part of Mexico City, although Mexico City now is having this extraordinary boom, and I hope we'll talk about that later. But at that point, the Colonia Juarez was not a particularly cool or safe place to run this nightclub, but we had an extraordinary time and it proved popular. And importantly, just keeping to your question, we made lots of friends, and we were really lucky enough to experience the Mexican welcome, which in our experience was at all social stratas, open-armed, and often are Mexican, I think of them in many ways as teachers, but also friends, wanted to express their culture through food. And that's where we got to experience some really extraordinary food and were afforded an education about the culinary scene in Mexico.
How much of that, I'm so interested in how much of the that magic, which is, like you say, it's It's colour, it's amazing food, it's drink, it's culture, it's a welcome, it's the people, it's the vibrations. How much of that transports easily to a place like London? I mean, we're so spoiled in London with all sorts of different food from all sorts of places. What is it that came across, and what can't come across?
That's a really interesting question, and I don't feel like I'm the person to answer that, because we have lots of guests who come and frequent the restaurant. We do try and create a transportive and convivial experience. There are all sorts of complications around the word authenticity, because how can I, an English person, create an authentic Mexican? It's just ridiculous to even think that I could.
Like the Beatles playing black music, though. Similar sort of vibe on the other way around. But
I think the Beatles did their 10,000 hours, and the music that they created was extraordinary in its own right.
Yeah.
But I would never refer to it as R&B.
Yes.
Sorry, that was a bit of a snaky non-answer. Sorry about that.
No.
But I really know that we didn't take any shortcuts in trying to create a delicious and transportive experience based on our experience in Mexico.
Yeah.
For instance, a lot of the recipes came from a really dear friend of mine, Francisco Musi. Now, the Musis started a group of restaurants in Mexico City called El Farolito.
Mm-hmm.
And they are third generation Lebanese. There was a huge Lebanese diaspora to Mexico starting at the end of the 19th century. And it was mostly Christian. They brought their cooking traditions with them. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but they wanted to reflect their heritage, and got there, saw that the mutton wasn't as good in the central Mexican plateau where most of the diaspora was focused. It wasn't as good as the pork. They adopted the pork. They found that the herbs and spices were different from the herbs and spices in the Middle East.
Yep.
The gluten content in the bread was different to that of where they would originally make flatbreads, so they adopted the tortilla. And with those slight changes, a Mexican Lebanese shawarma was born in the form of a taco al pastor.
Amazing.
And this is a dish that is prevalent in Mexico City and central Mexican, but in effect, it's a product of migration. And the Musis, they began their restaurant in the early 60s, and it flourished and was successful. And Francisco became a really, really dear friend. Again, friend and educator. He gave all of his recipes, his family's recipes, to us.
Yeah.
Gave his recipe for tacos al pastor, which is a closely guarded secret, all of their salsas. And that was the cornerstone on which we were able to build El Pastor. And, you know, I will always credit him and his family as the genesis and educators. Yeah, absolutely.
And it's also so interesting that I suppose we see something that we feel is Mexican food, but that's actually that dish or that culture has been on its own round the world trip before we got to Mexico.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, so the dish is different between there and here. It's gone on another 6,000 or 7,000 mile journey.
Yeah.
And of course, you know, a taco al pastor that you can eat in London will be different from, you know, one of the great pastors I've ever eaten is in New York City in Los Tacos number one.
Yeah.
Which, you know, for me is a culinary must do in New York. So the way these dishes change in tiny, incremental and significant ways on their journeys is really important.
Yeah. And we've touched on some of this stuff. I think people listening to this would be interested to know what, it's not too obvious a question, I hope, but what are, and we touched on some stuff, but what are the ingredients of a great restaurant experience in your mind? Because I guess what started as a passion and, you know, from a nightclub and a media background, you must have gradually got into the business model as well of restaurants. Because if you don't master that, you're kind of toast, aren't you? And you kind of got to marry your passion and understand that with the business model. Yeah. What are the ingredients of a great restaurant, and also one in an incredibly difficult environment that can survive?
Well, God, you keep firing the brilliant questions at me. I think a great restaurant has to be transportive.
Yeah.
I think you have to feel like you're leaving some of the aspects of your life that you choose to leave behind for a bit. Yeah. I think that a restaurant experience can be, you know, at its best, cathartic, transportive. I think conviviality is really important. There are so many tales of people meeting over breaking bread.
Yes.
And I'm being glib with the word meeting, but actually it's where you can have a neutral ground where ideas and your personality is intermingled with someone else's, or it changes or it swaps, or there's real communication.
Yeah.
And for a restaurant to be able to create that environment, that to me is a truly great hospitality experience. Obviously, great food. I mean, great food, impeccable service.
Yeah.
Really feeling looked after, going that extra mile. Pretty much anything Danny Meyer says, those are all really important. And of course, the business aspect of it is all super important.
Yeah.
And at the same time, really the first and foremost is your guests' experience, because word of mouth will always be the most effective way of keeping a restaurant going.
Yeah. Do you micro obsess? I assume you do, over like lighting and the placing of furniture and the architectural flourishes. This, I guess, the things we notice less as guests that you might notice more. Do you obsess over those things?
There's lots that I personally am obsessed about, but the older, and I wish I could say wiser, that I get, but let's just stick with older for the moment.
Yeah.
I realize how much I don't know, and I realize the importance of getting people within your group who do know about the individual aspects of the experience to obsess about, because there are so many aspects to making a great restaurant experience that you just have to lean into the truism that nobody knows everything.
Yeah. How do you, and that's actually, perhaps everyone has actually read Unreasonable Hospitality, it seems, so maybe it is a bit more on the mind, but all these amazing people who make up the entire experience, and you talked about, is it Jeremy Lee, the most amazing chef, but then front of house or sommelier, whoever it is.
Yeah.
Is your talent spotting radar got better over the years? Can you sniff these people out?
It's
quickly?
Definitely got better. We're a kind of medium-sized group in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
I think in totality we employ about 550 people, and I would love to say, oh, my radar's peerless, but Chris, who actually heads up our recruitment team, her radar is peerless. Our head chefs, their radar is peerless when they're recruiting people in the kitchen, you know, and that of course they've got to factor in so many aspects, but notably whether they can work within a team. Our general managers are every day better and better at finding jigsaw pieces that will slot seamlessly into the overall tapestry.
You were a big part of the Cold Drop Yards development. You know, you're everywhere there for obvious reasons. Can you just talk about that? Because I suppose in some ways it's a great privilege to be in London and these things happen that are still world leading and people don't talk about enough how good we are at those things.
Yeah.
It's Cold Drop Yards. Can you just explain what that is and your part in it?
Cold Drop Yards is a development created by the landlord Argent, and I think at one point British Land, and it was a reconstruction of an area behind King's Cross, slightly to the north of King's Cross train station.
Which when you were growing up would have been an absolute shithole.
No, not at all.
really?
It was a really important part of growing up for me. I mentioned that I was into music.
Yeah.
What I consider to be a great privilege is that we operate a restaurant on the site where one of my favourite nightclubs ever was.
Oh, no way. I was always told stories about how dangerous King's Cross was, or, in the 80s or 90s. Or
Well, Bagley's was one of the seminal nightclubs in London.
Okay.
And also the Cross was another just completely amazing club where brilliant music happened.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to deny that it wasn't polished until you can see your face in it. But, what luck and privilege to have been able to have gone out in these places that now pass into the folklore of British electronic music scenes, which, just gave birth to so much pivotal music and a generation. And when the opportunity came to even pitch to do a restaurant in Cold Drops,
it was personal.
It was something intensely personal. And we were lucky enough to get the green light for that in 2017. And we opened in October 2018.
Yep.
It hasn't been a smooth run at all. It was reimagined, redesigned by the architect Thomas Heatherwick. It's a stunning reimagining of what were originally the coal sheds that the trains from the north of the UK, specifically Yorkshire, would bring. The coal was stored there, and that coal largely powered London,
Powered the
north
whole of
the
London.
river.
Wow.
And the two huge warehouses were what was used to store them. There's a little side street called Stable Street, which housed the horses, which would take the coal to various subplants. And it's an incredible reimagining of it. But as I say, the agents and the landlord were very, very optimistic in their ideas of what the footfall would be. I think it's fair to say, and if the landlord was sat in this room with me, I think they'd find it hard to disagree that the original curation of the retail offer was challenging and not widely accessible. It's been a bumpy road. And then weirdly, the pandemic happened. And what happened is that previously the space had been a bit agoraphobic. There was this huge courtyard where there was never any central focus. And so I feel that the visitor would feel slightly overawed by the space. There's as I say, there's this huge open courtyard with no particular direction to head to. You had to head down this long ramp, and it just didn't quite connect. Maybe it looked better on a CGI render than it did in real life. And then the pandemic happened, and there weren't many outside spaces in the very heart of London that all could take advantage of. The fountains outside St. Martin's suddenly became a place where community converged.
Yes.
People started going down that ramp. There was, of course, the opportunity for outside dining. That became a preference, and we'd built El Pastor. Half of it was inside and half of it was a huge terrace, and the same with Barafina and Parian upstairs. And suddenly outside dining in the UK became a thing.
Yeah.
And we were lucky enough to have this space that was almost purpose built for a post or inter-pandemic situation.
Yeah.
And that's really what put us kind of on the map, and really interesting businesses in the on the site, the King's Cross site. Lots of record labels,
Yeah.
ad agencies, local government is based there.
Perfect custom.
And fortunately, we struck up I mean, obviously Camden keep a very strict eye on us, but we earned some really good guest relations, and those continue to this day. And we are finding a way through and thriving in over there.
Really keen to know as well, like either in the Mexican sphere or Quo Vadis or anything, like have you got anything on which you're allowed to talk about sort of innovation or what's coming next, or something that you're obsessing about that's coming up?
Well, I mean, there's quite a lot. We're going to attempt to open a restaurant in El Pastor outside of London.
Okay. In the UK?
In the UK.
Yeah.
I'd love to open a restaurant in Manchester. I've got a real connection to Manchester. It's where much of the formative stuff around music, that was something that I dived headlong into, was so key in my life. Been going back to Manchester a bit recently, and it's incredibly energized.
Sniffing out sites, or just for fun?
Yeah, well, a bit of both.
Yeah.
But like the positivity in Manchester is just, it's just amazing. And also they don't suffer bullshit there, and it's just I've always enjoyed every second of my time in Manchester, and it'd be a real honour to be able to do something there.
Do you think any of your concepts would work outside the UK?
Well, we are going to do a Barafina in the Middle East, in Dubai, which we're working alongside some really talented partners to do a Barafina in DIFC. So hopefully that will be opening in January. So that's a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's lots of bits and pieces in the works. There's it's quite challenging to create new business in the UK at the moment. If you're lucky enough to be able to expand, then everything needs to be, if we were considering everything in triplicate, now we're doing it tenfold. So there's a little more caution, but maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that has its own engine in itself.
Yeah. Do you think, I mean, does that sort of, on that point around the UK, do you think the UK just in general, not even in restaurants, do you think it's a tricky place at the moment? Or
I do.
Do you feel depressed or positive? Or do you think positivity's around the corner?
I think it's a really interesting time. I do think that some of the political decisions, I'll say it, like Brexit, was just, it was such an act of self-sabotage. And I think that continuously trying to appeal to a more right-wing tendency, becoming more parochial and insular, I don't think it's the right way forward. I think that we are watching a talent drain from this country, and after all, like the European exit from this country is absolutely lamentable. I see so much talent leaving these shores, so much homegrown talent. That's not even European homegrown, as it were, if you know what I mean. But, bright British kids from the ages of 22 to 38, just taking a look at it and going, why? When Europe, the Far East,
Dubai, wherever, America,
Latin America is a land of more opportunity. And at the same time, so that's the gloomy aspect. But I would say, on the other side, Britain has got a real track record of extraordinary things happening when it's at its shittest, and I would cite punk, ska in the form of the specials, and that two-tone happening. And importantly, the rave generation happened just like at when
poll tax and all of that was happening. Yeah.
When Thatcher had literally decimated the country for generations.
Yeah.
And I am hoping, notwithstanding the wanton destruction of the nightlife scene, I am really hoping that those sparks of creativity will start something, a bigger ball rolling.
Yes, I'd agree with you. But I also the talent drain is painful to watch because each month it seems to get worse and worse. But I'd agree. History would say that something good will happen at some point, but it's a challenging environment. You've done so much in your career that we've barely touched on in this podcast. Like I said at the beginning, from music to TV presenting to food to opening nightclubs to cultural collaborations, etc. I did just have some shorter questions that might touch on that. What was
Excellent. Non-rehearsed?
What's the most dangerous situation you've ever found yourself in?
Manchester. I'm not going to say anything else.
Not Mexico. You just need to say that. Manchester, not Mexico.
Yeah, I think because that particular occasion was totally unforeseen and there wasn't much that one could do to stop it. Whereas in the likes of Latin America, you can find your own trouble wherever you look for it. But I largely was welcomed with open arms and kind of really protected. In Mexico, I went to university in Colombia.
Yeah.
Spent lots of time in Brazil, and I got really lucky and had all sorts of adventures, but really was very well looked after.
Yeah. And if you had to point to, with all these experiences and jobs, amazing, if you had to point to 1 year of your life that was the most just raw fun, not necessarily most fulfilling, not most grown up, but what was the funnest year or situation you're in from all those experiences?
Well, not going to lie, this year's had its highlights, but I mean, there have been some really good ones. 2001 was a seminal year for house music in particular. Getting to play Sundays at Space, which was an iconic and legendary nightclub, was really amazing. I think that, I'm going to show my age, but 89 to 91 for hip hop and early house music and what was going on in London and Manchester was absolutely extraordinary. 96 to 7, when the whole kind of cool Britannia thing, but like London was just going off. 2006, like the whole indie thing was completely amazing. It's just too much.
You've lived through it all. Where would you, in all these places you've lived or experienced, where would you spiritually consider home? Is it still the
London.
UK? Yeah, London.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
through it all, you're still a Londoner.
Definitely London, yeah. It would be disingenuous to call anywhere else home.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. One word answer.
And on Mexico, this is a really cheap question, but what's your favorite tequila? It's the dying question everyone wants to know.
It's called Caballito Cerrero.
Okay, write that down.
And hard to find, and they've had to stop calling themselves a tequila because they exited the CRT, which is the Consejo Regional de Tequilas, which is like they own the DO, and there's controversies around them. So now if you ever see a bottle of Caballito Cerrero, which is available in some of the finer drinking establishments of London, it is it's not called a tequila, it's called a destilado de agave, but it is a tequila.
Yeah.
And if you're looking for a more available tequila, there's one called Cascawin. I could really chat about tequila for a very long time.
And your favourite dish amongst all of your various establishments that you manage or have eyes over? What's your favourite dish that you'd advise people to try?
I mean, Jeremy's eel sandwich is kind of epic.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I can't resist a banderia barafina, and I know I'm going for three. And our tuna tostadas at El Pastor are pretty special too. And of course, you could ask me tomorrow and there'd be three different answers.
They'd be changed. What would you most like to change about your industry?
I would most like to ensure a pathway for independents to have a good run in order to flourish. I think it's so difficult. As I said, those single operators, it's so challenging, single site operators. So if there was some form of tangible governmental support that would enable the nascent business to have a fair crack at the title, that's what I'd like to figure out.
Yeah, I agree on that. Also, they're the fabric of a community, restaurants, like small restaurants.
Absolutely.
And they make a place, and it's just almost impossible to run something that pays the bills.
Yeah, absolutely.
What most concerns you about the world we're leaving the next generation?
Ooh, do you ask that to everyone?
Yeah, we do. And about 80% of people answer
Don't tell me
the same thing.
Okay. I think the politics of division.
Okay, not many people say that, so that's good.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
What do they say?
They say technology and phones. Like attention, technology, not communicating, that sort of thing. It used to be very much weighted towards the environment, but
yeah, I think that the opportunism that bad actors are using, the politics, sowing discord and division. I think that's what I'd most like to. I think that's the most damaging.
Yeah. Do you know, interestingly, I suspect that's what most people think, but not many people want to say that because that's the sort of world we live in, where some people don't want to say that because that then has an effect, doesn't it?
Shit, am I going to get cancelled for saying that?
Possibly. No.
Okay.
If you had to give up your job tomorrow, what would you do? Would you go back to music?
If I had to give up my job tomorrow, I would become really good at doing barbacoa.
Really? You'd perfect the art?
Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. And what's
the answer may well change tomorrow, by the way.
Yes. I mean, in the next 5 years, for you personally, what's the most exciting thing coming up? Personal, professional?
We've got some people who I work alongside who are so clearly extraordinarily talented.
Right.
That I can't wait to see the fruition and what they bring to our lives. I'm really excited about that.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited about seeing what my daughter turns into. But that's probably too anodyne an answer.
No. How old's your daughter?
She's 11.
Yeah.
So that fills me with excitement.
Yeah. Well, on that happy note, Crispin, thank you so much for today. Like as I said, it's such a wide-ranging career and really interesting what you do in an industry we haven't covered enough on this podcast, a little bit, but not enough. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And there's plenty of folk who are much more talented than me. So if you want me to put you in touch with them, I'd be delighted to.
Absolutely not. Thank you, Crispin.
Thank you.
Cheers.